Okay, what's up, dude? All right. So, podcast episode 2. We are back with the Gym Monk podcast, and today we're going to discuss my first cycle. Although I would be honest, I'm taking so little, most people would take less on a cruise, but more on a cruise. But anyways, so the purpose is. What's that?
I think my first cycle was probably worse.
Well, hopefully we've all learned something. The goal is going to be hypertrophy. Obviously, it's me 13 to 15 weeks. I started, the setup obviously is always important because where you are sets up where you're going next. So it was a TRT and it was 50 milligrams 3 times a week. And the goal is to gain approximately 10 kilograms. This is just sort of the weight progression, like over the first little bit. So just to kind of give people because I took my weight every single morning. So if you were, for example, took your weight on day 7, right, and then you didn't take your weight again until day 19, you would have noticed that you've lost weight over time. However, when you kind of do a trend line with it, then you can very clearly see that it's actually continuously increasing, right? So this is just kind of I thought this would be a good example for people who get really neurotic about their weight and only take their weight once or twice a week. You're actually not going to get an accurate representation of the overall trend because there's these massive fluctuations, as you can see, right?
Yeah, I mean, I typically, for myself, I try to weigh myself 3-4 times a week and then take the average. Even more is better. Because, I mean, it depends so much on what you've been doing that day and the previous day and stuff like that. So I think also playing by eye, in my opinion, is sometimes best. If you can avoid being an overly critical and stuff.
Yeah. And then we've just got some posing, but these photos are really shit, so I'm going to move to doing video instead because it's more representative of the physique, but the left is before and the right is 3 weeks in, which is about half of where I'm at now, so that everyone can kind of get an idea of where it started, and then...
Well, there's a clear difference. Yeah, no, clear difference.
The back is definitely getting thicker, right? You can see that, and then a little bit of width.
Your legs, just your legs.
No. Apologies, was a phone call from someone who, never mind. And then, we've got where I'm at now, which is looking a little bit better, I think. But the width is, I feel like I'm happy that the lats are widening up a lot because I've always really struggled to get the lats to kind of start to stand out a little bit. The arms really still need a lot of centimeters. That's just...
The arms are fucking long though.
They are.
It's big time. But you look fucking good.
But
what your calories are per day at this point?
About 4.
Really?
Yeah.
You're staying fucking lean.
Yeah. About 4. Which is good. I'm going a little bit gentler on the carbs. I'm not pushing them quite as hard. I was up until maybe 600 or more carbs. It's a bit much. I'm down to maybe 500 now. Which it feels a little bit better. I think I was pushing the carbs a little bit hard.
Oh yeah, I think the carbs have kind of diminishing returns at some point.
Yeah, you hit the ceiling.
Just making more work than anything else.
But yeah, I'm pretty happy with the results so far. And the kind of the logic of the cycle as well is that I'm going to be kind of progressively. So let's check out your progress. You're leaner than I am by quite a bit.
Posing is anything. That's the only shot I know how to do, by the way. I want to work on my arm, my back, quite a lot. I mean, apart from doing legs and everything else, my triceps, I think, have to come up the most.
Arms, back, and hamstrings, I think,
Yeah, hamstrings for sure.
So, do I have my training log here? Oh no, I don't. So, and then I was gonna do a little thing on insulin, but so I wanted to tell you what happened with the Mk-677. So I was taking it at like 25 milligrams, which is the clinical like mother load dose. Like it's meant to be like the optimum clinical dose for maximum results. The problem is that it also pushes the button in your brain that hits it's the ghrelin mimetic, right? So it pushes that hunger thing, right? So that's where you started struggling with the excessive appetite. When were you dosing? When were you dosing your Mk-677?
But yeah, that was terrible.
Sorry, but what was the timing of day that you dosed?
So I dosed like 20 minutes just before, after, like 20 minutes before I'm done training, and then at night before I go to sleep every day.
Okay. Was the hunger as much of a problem than when you did it just before bed?
Mate, I woke up at 3 a.m.
Okay, you see, that's the problem. That's the problem, is if you take it pre-bed, you wake up at 3 a.m. and you're suddenly like wired awake and you're kind of hungry, right? So
By the way, and that stuck with me now. So now I've not been on it now for 2 months, whatever. I still wake up at 3 a.m. hungry. So it got away. The hunger's still there. But I mean, I am deep all the time, so that is a big one.
Yeah, I mean, you're only a couple of weeks away from stage, honestly. Like you're probably 8 weeks out of like a pretty serious dieting. So yeah. So what happened was I was becoming very anxious. Like it was driving the sort of anxiety, stress signaling too hard, and it basically resulted in me becoming a little bit more neurotic, and my blood sugar started going up because now the stress hormones go up, which pushes blood sugar up. Now we've got the growth hormone really high and stress hormones really high. So the blood sugar is just super, super through the roof. So I had like a pretty shit fasting blood sugar. It was like 115, which is very yeah.
It's hard for me, it was hard to kind of pinpoint exactly, because for me, in general, because I think back now, I also realized a large amount of anxiety spewing up whilst I was using it. But it's so hard for me to judge that characteristic in particular, because anxiety is for me always a thing. Like it's always in the background.
Yeah.
But it wasn't fucking fun. But I mean, Mk-6, I did gain almost like fucking, I think, 2.5 kilograms by using it.
Yeah.
It was only that, I don't know. But it did make quite a bit of difference. But I think the low doses, in my opinion,
yeah, so I switched it to, instead of doing pre-bed, I'm doing pre-workout only. So I'm not going to take any pre-bed because I also noticed that it hits you the hardest the first couple of hours that it's in your system. So if I do a pre-workout, I figure like you're gonna burn through some of that stressing potential before bed, so that that's already kind of getting blunted, but there's still an effect that's gonna keep driving, growth hormone to get a kind of a best of both worlds scenario. So I'm down to 10 milligrams instead of 25. And then otherwise what I've been doing was I was doing 32 milligrams of testosterone per administration. That's every single day, and then I dropped it at just after week 5 to 30 because I was feeling just a little bit like too androgenic, kind of too much stimulation. But I don't know if that was, but back then my Mk-677 doses were very, very high. So I don't know if it was that because now I feel like I want to take more testosterone. Like I'm feeling like, I could take more now. I could handle more now.
I must say that's what I realized initially when it's why I don't easily give people like advice. I mean, to friends and stuff like that, people that actually know their bodies at some point, then I wouldn't mind. But in general, to like the layman, the way I did it was maybe I played a bit more by ear because I stayed on only test for like a year.
Yeah.
And then my diet was exactly the same for a year, and all my workouts were basically the same, and my schedule was the same.
Yeah.
So whenever I put in a new variable, I knew exactly what the thing was that was, driving whatever, feeding whatever.
Yeah.
So doing like not tossing too many things into like the fucking, into the pot at one point, what flavor is going to come out.
Yeah.
So slowly adding things, I think initially just to find out how you react to it is fucking like the best.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, I mean, you can chat to some guy, or anyone and say, listen, this compound worked the best for me. And then someone else, he says, no, yes, that was terrible. It made me feel like, I was fucking running up the walls, whatever.
Yeah.
So it's so hard to actually get that. It just takes time. It's like a willingness to experiment.
Right, exactly. So I think what was happening there was my sort of tolerance for adrenergic like stress signaling was reaching a maximal point because the combination of the MK and the androgenic signaling from the DHT from the testosterone. So now that the MK has come down, like there's room for more signaling, right? Like I don't feel hyper stimulated anymore. So I think the hyperstimulation was the Mk-677. So I'm gonna drive the test up a little bit, but I don't really want to go above 300 a week. And
Can you explain like what the overstimulation feels like?
Yeah, it's like I'm like just generally more aggressive, more kind of like, that sort of fight or flight. I'm just gonna play this in the background so that the people have something to look at. Actually, I'm gonna try something quickly and see if it works. Okay,
that's what it seems like.
Okay, we're back.
Yeah.
Okay, sweet. Now we can do a bit of a different screen look. Right. So yeah, like you were saying. Right. The signaling. So when that sort of fight or flight signaling, when like you kind of feel more threatened, the feeling that Tren gives you, that sort of really heightened, like kind of feeling. Everything else will give it to you less because Tren is just so much stronger, obviously. But it's just, which I mean, do you know who D-Tren is?
It sounds familiar. Was he a football player or something? Not.
No, he's a TikToker.
Oh no.
D-Tren. Like they're like Tren is in the name. Like he literally was advocating. I mean, whether he's being serious or not, it's TikTok. But he was advocating Tren as a first cycle. This guy also did. He also started off dosing Tren at. This is how little he knows about how drugs work. He started dosing it at 700 mgs a week. And then he pushed it up to a gram.
700?
Yeah, he started Tren at 700 and then pushed it up to a gram. Which is like, people don't... Okay, so what people don't understand about Tren is that it's like 5 to 10 times stronger than testosterone, right? Like in terms of its activation. So 700 is like multiple grams of testosterone worth of signaling. Like there's no way that a young like untrained athlete who doesn't have 10 or 15 years of PED use behind their backs, you can't make use of a gram of Tren. Like you don't have enough receptors to use that much Tren. Like in your muscle tissue, you don't.
A full-grown bull would not have enough receptors to fucking a gram of Tren, if I'm honest. Like the bull would feel it. Like he would notice it's there.
Because I think there's this idea somehow that's like, I don't think there's a general understanding of the fact that there's receptors required for all these things to happen. Like you've got to that molecule, right? You got the receptor, and then you've got to actually it's got to dock with it, activate the receptor, and then undock, and then another one can come and dock and activate it again. But your number of receptors is limited by how much muscle mass you have, your experience, like how many years you've been using androgens, because they build up over time. You actually get more and more androgen receptors, which is why more experienced guys use more gear and have less side effects, because they have so many receptors that it's actually able to hold all of that gear.
Like I think a lot of guys that like use cycles, because I mean now here in Thailand, like we said off camera, you can walk into a pharmacy here and they can give you a catalog of whatever you want. I mean, there's Tren, there's Mastron, there's Deca, everything you want. And then the amount of how much it costs is written with like a whiteboard marker above the thing, right? And there's, tests and Primo and stuff like, okay, how much is the Primo? The guy's like, I don't know. No one has ordered it before. But the Tren and the Deca and the Mastron all have the prices on it. So like people think like I think a lot of guys that start doing cycling the first time, they treat your body as like the digestive tract, right? So if you use normal supplements, you just eat whey protein, it's going to be used, or it's going to go through you and stuff like that. But they don't, and so they kind of think, in my opinion, that steroids is the same thing. You just dump it all in your system, and it's going to do something with it, right? It's going to use it. Of course, it's not that I'm damaging my liver and my kidneys. It's just it's gonna be used. Of course.
But so like what people don't really understand is, as you've very well said, but even with their digestive systems, there's this problem as well, where like you can only take so much food. You can only use so much food depending on how much training experience you have and how much physiology you have, how much contractile tissue you have, right? Like,
but I think the side effects that is maybe a bit more like. You're kind of okay with it. Like you're more used to it. Like, okay, I'm getting a bit fat or a bit bloated. It's not like, my back looks like it's been blasted, like, Dresden, the Second World War with fucking, That's like, your liver is fucked, though. That's why you have all this pimples. Like, it's and the excess oil. You're probably not doing very well right now.
Dude, so zinc supplementation. Here's another thing. If you add zinc, you're going to metabolize your androgens better because zinc is one of the cofactors required for the metabolism and use of androgens.
Oh, really?
Yes. It's a no-brainer. You have to supplement with zinc because there's so much androgens, like in comparison to what a normal person has to digest, that you need the extra zinc. So a zinc picolinate is apparently the best, like most bioavailable, long-lasting form of zinc. And literally, I started taking it, and the little bit of extra acne that I was getting as a result of the more testosterone started, like, it's going down. Like, it's improving. My skin quality is improving, which shows to me that I wasn't really metabolizing my androgens as effectively as I could have. Actually, it was after I added the zinc that I was like, oh, I could take more. So,
but I mean, when I was talking about like first cycles and stuff, right? Because I mean, when I was 18, it was the first time I ever did anything, and the classic fucking Liebel only cycle to start with. I can't tell you how much I took. I can't remember. I was fucking but after that, so I was like, I don't know how many weeks I did that, like 5 pills a day, maybe 5 milligrams a pill, maybe I can't remember. And then when I was gonna get off it, I asked my friend who told me to do this in the first place, like, okay, what do I do now? It's like just jump on Sustaplex and get more into D-balls. And Sustaplex is like a test mix, I think. I don't know, I think it might be the D-balls, but man, luckily I don't have any scars at all from it, but the amount of acne I got from the deck on the Sustaplex was horrendous. It was fucking... It looked horrible. Like I had to jump on like Raccutane, Orotan, whatever at that point, and that was the only thing that cleared it up because it was bad. Because I mean, when you're that age, and most people, I mean, most guys even my age who want to get on the first cycle younger, they don't think about it. You just listen to some guy at the gym, and there's no reason to do that. Like you don't have to start with animals and. Should not start with train, but yeah, because the side effects can be fucking, I mean, disastrous. It's not great.
So for reference, I was on a TRT dose of 150, and then I would move to 220, roughly speaking, and then I dropped it down to 210. And like. Yeah, I mean, I'm clearly making gains. Like, you don't have to start with 400 or 500 milligrams of anything to get a result. But then there is the problem with, like, testosterone very quickly has a limit to, like, the benefit to reward ratio, like the risk to reward ratio, because as you take more and more testosterone, you're getting more and more conversion into DHT. And DHT is the thing responsible for hair loss, but it's also responsible for the deepening of the voice, prostate enlargement, secondary sex characteristics, like... It can drive some of the negative outcomes. So using a pharmaceutically enhanced or specified form of DHT like Primo or Masteron or Anavar is going to need to come in at some point because I just can't keep. Sorry.
in terms of that, like my voice has deepened so much since I started. Like my voice was breaking up until the age of 20. Like I still sometimes it's still broke until I got on TRT, and then it just kind of got into this. But it has there's so many things that people don't take into account. They just think, oh, I'm going to use this thing and it's going to make me buff, right?
Yeah.
But they think about everything else it does, because it like testosterone or any of these things, like there's so many different effects that it has. You can call it side effects, but I mean it's side effects because you choose to rather not focus on those so much. I think most of the time.
They're side effects because you're trying to forget that they're happening, right?
No, they're just move to the side. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, exactly. So just a little point of education for people with the different like types of steroids. So if for the reason that nandrolone has such a bad name is that it facilitates the aromatization of testosterone into estrogen. So it actually goes to the aromatase enzyme, like hooks onto it and supercharges it, so that every testosterone that comes past, it's cleaving into estrogen, right? So if you're using nandrolone, you have to manage estrogen, either through an estrogen suppressive compound like EQ. So what Ryan Rousseau is doing now is he's running EQ and DECA and a little bit of test. So it's a base of, I think, 200, 250 test, and then he's running EQ and DECA on top of that, because those two will cancel each other out in terms of estrogen. But you can also run Primo, or you can run Masteron or Primo. Masteron will be more effective in terms of the suppression of estrogen, but it drives neurological function maybe more than what's good for physique athletes. Out of Masteron and Primo, one is very physique orientated, that's Primo, because it just increases muscle protein synthesis. Like that's about it. Primo is super, super clean until you get to the super high doses where you exceed your ability to use it. So people get side effects with Primo, but that's when they go over a gram. Tony Huge blasted Primo over a gram, and then he started losing his hair. I think he was doing 1.2 grams a week, which is very, very, very high.
I don't know if it's true, right? But I recently read into Masteron a bit, and apparently there was a guy I read. He said that even if you use something like finasteride on Masteron at enough dosage, it doesn't do shit. It's gonna blow the hair out of your head.
Yeah.
Nonetheless.
Yeah. Well, so that's the thing. DHT is gonna blow the hair off your head, right? I'm trying to get rid of my hair. I'm happy to lose mine, but because I got a nice dome, but and I'm genetically predisposed. So there's no my dad's lost his hair young. So I'm not winning this. So, but DHT specifically, the pure DHT made as a derivative of testosterone is much worse on hair loss than Primo or Masteron. Much worse.
Oh, yeah.
Right? So those two, but you see, the thing is, Masteron wasn't made as an anabolic steroid. It was made to suppress estrogen in women with breast cancer.
For breast cancer.
Yeah.
A lot of these drugs are for breast cancer. Most of the anti-estrogens were initially.
But Primo is predominantly used for muscle mass and bone mass, and EPO, more red blood cells. So it's.
I think they do prescribe, though they did prescribe Primo to I think people with HIV and AIDS and some as well.
Yes. Exactly. And Primo is still, you can still in some countries prescribe Primo. It's still a prescription medication. It's still made by pharmaceutical companies. That and Anavar. So we know based on the pharmaceuticals' disposition towards these steroids that Anavar and Primo are the safest.
Yeah.
Right, which is
in my experience as well. In terms of side effects, I've noticed the least from those two. And I mean, in terms of usage and stuff, I am very fucking. When I was younger, I think I was a bit more stupid. Not that I ever did huge cycles like gram or whatever, or gram a test, gram of fucking trend. But I've always been very half. I've been afraid to go for the higher doses. So, also, I've only recently, past 5-6 months, started using Primo on a regular basis, and it has had a lot of effects. Mostly, the reason I use it for is to keep my fucking estrogen in check.
Yeah.
Because I'm so prone to fucking growing gyno at this point. And it's actually crazy. I mean, I had a client, I didn't prescribe him to do this. Like, when I got him as a client, he was already doing it. He was on, I think, like 600 tests a week and 300 DECA or something like that, right? So, quite high. But he had no. He didn't use any AIs. Didn't grow any gyno. Nothing.
Fucking what?
I mean,
that's insane.
So, I mean, yeah. And, I mean, obviously, it depends on your own biology and stuff at some point. But, I mean, obviously, at some point, you are going to start growing gyno.
Yeah, you will.
And when you've started, you're not going to stop ever.
No.
Then you're going to have to keep that shit in check every single time.
Yeah.
And I hear guys say, oh, no, it's good when they want they feel their nips become sensitive because then they know the gear they're using is legit. And I'm like, okay, well, first of all, why are you injecting something into your body that you're unsure of, and then you have to check for fucking growing tits?
Look, like, if you want to find out, just go to the doctors, get your testosterone checked before you inject it, right? Like, when you're still natural, inject the testosterone and then get your blood work done in a couple of weeks. And it will show the difference if it's real gear. Like, I mean, there's like a relatively cheap, because just getting testosterone checked is not so much. If you just get that one marker checked, right? So you can easily, like, I went and checked, like, my gear is legit. My testosterone is off, like, very, very high. Although still, right, on 150 mgs a week of TRT replacement, which is supposedly more than what anybody should be able to, it's still less than my dad's. At 50, in his 50s. Cool. In his 50s. His was...
Your dad had...
Maybe I'll try and get some pictures of him, like, in a lean state later and bring it onto another podcast. But I don't know how to explain it. It doesn't even make sense. I asked started asking questions. I'm like, was there an attractive nurse? Like, was there something? Because we know in elderly men, if they're like around a young attractive woman, just in the same room as them, their testosterone will go up. Like, as a temporary phenomena, their body will release a little burst of testosterone, and like men are like literally activated by females, like, that are attractive. It immediately activates this whole cascade of things. So I was like, was the nurse particularly attractive? Like help me understand. Like, how is it that you have levels that are higher than a young man? Like, you understand that teenagers don't get blood levels like this. Like, it's not. Like, my TRT wasn't getting me even to the same peak serum level, like, but yeah, so...
My dad also, like, he's 62 years old, man. Like, we've trained together now since I've came here. And most exercises, like, a lot of exercises, he's slightly, like, 5 or 6 or maybe 10 kilograms beneath me with any exercise. And he's fucking 62 years old. Like, he's fucking such a strong fucking guy. But the crazy thing is, he's buffer now than he was when he was 45 years old. Because a few years ago, he started using like, going on TRT and stuff, but actually prescribed by a doctor.
Yeah.
So I just want to...
No, that's great. You guys should, just as a course of, since you're two, quote unquote enhanced athletes in the same house, you should get a blood sugar meter and a blood pressure cuff. You should check your blood pressures.
Yeah, I think that is. Yeah, I think on the island as well. Yeah, it's like getting your blood test is actually not that expensive. So I'm going to do that quite soon, and I'm going to try whilst I'm in Thailand, do that more regularly as well.
Yeah. But just checking on things like blood pressure, because blood pressure can often clue you into if something is wrong. Like so I barely slept. I woke up at 3 a.m., had a very hard time sleeping. When I took my blood pressure, it was high. It's like, duh, because I didn't sleep well. Right? So it's like it begins to give you this feedback, like, okay, something is wrong. My blood pressure is going up. Like, my body is stressing about something, right? Like, my training is out. I'm not eating enough. Something is kind of there. Okay, and then this is the bit where I'm going to try and convince you to use insulin.
Okay.
So Okay, so I've been doing a very, very deep dive on insulin. So just for everybody to give them a kind of a textbook foundational of like what does insulin do? Insulin is a peptide hormone, which means it's made up of a chain of amino acids. So it's made from protein. It's released by the pancreas, the beta cells in the pancreas, in response to high blood sugar. Now, insulin physiologically drives a whole bunch of very important functions. It's released when you eat anything. So even if you're just eating protein and fat, you'll still have a small release of insulin. Because it is also stimulated a little bit by the fact that there's food coming in, and that will push up the blood sugar as well. So, so basically what insulin does is it binds to the GLUT4 receptor, which requires chromium. So chromium's another thing you can supplement with a higher carb diet to prevent getting fat, because it makes the insulin the shuttling of sugar work more efficiently. So it makes you more anabolic. So keeping your chromium, getting a chromium supplement is also really important for, high carb, like contest diet, because you're going to want to take your carbs up and your fats down. But anyways, so you get a cocktail but when the GLUT4 transporter works, it also moves like ions, so that's sodium and potassium, and it's also moving water and carbohydrates all together with amino acids. And then fats obviously get transported as well. So it's also an anabolic signal. So the more insulin is being signaled in a muscle, the more it's storing glycogen. And for us with the physique-based sports, we want to get as much like glycogen storage and glycogen synthase, which is the enzyme that produces glycogen. We want to upregulate the amount of glycogen synthase so that we can store more and more glycogen in the muscle. So you can get that bigger, more full kind of look. It also drives protein synthesis, so having more insulin is beneficial for that, right? It also inhibits the release of corticosteroids and glucocorticoids and those sorts of things. So it actually blunts stress responses, which is why people eat when they're stressed. Right? It's part of that whole mechanism, right? The other thing is it keeps blood pressure down because it keeps the arterial walls soft. So you get a better pump if you use insulin, let's say pre-workout, because it's a vasodilator. It's helping the blood flow more efficiently. And then it also signals cells to recycle their ATP because it signals an excess of energy environment. So the neurons, as well as the muscles, the myofibers, the muscle cells are going to more quickly, the mitochondria is going to more quickly recycle the energy there because it's like, oh, there's extra energy coming in. So let's make sure that we're using all of this energy. And then it also drives BDNF, which is brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which helps us learn. So when used in like a, let's say, peri-workout situation, like maybe pre-workout and there's insulin in the bloodstream during the workout, you're actually going to drive neurological learning. So the contractions are going to get better. You're going to have that mind-muscle connection is going to be improved. And then basically this is then the uses of it. So we can drive performance and learning by adding it pre-workout. And we can boost recovery by adding it post-workout or on rest days with other recovery chemistry. So let's say if we're bringing something like L-carnitine in, which is something I'm becoming a very big fan of, if we're taking L-carnitine with insulin on a rest day, let's say like 1 IU of insulin with a low-carb meal and a little bit of carnitine, then you're going to drive beta oxidation, which is fat burning, and recovery. So there's little things we can do by using microdoses of insulin to activate specific cascades where otherwise insulin would be absent, right? That's the acute use of insulin. Then the chronic use of insulin, which is why, let's say, high-carb diets tend to lead to a better outcome off-season-wise, which is why guys get a little bit bigger on just by driving carbs than by trying to drive with fat as a calorie thing, is because it increases IGF-1 binding proteins. So what that means is that your growth hormone or Mk-677 or just endogenous IGF is going to work better because it's going to have more binding proteins to extend its longevity and serum concentrations and function, which we want, right? If we're trying to drive body composition improvements, we want that IGF. It also acts as an HRT for hypermuscular athletes. Now, neither of us are quite in that category just yet, but we will hit, we're planning on getting there. So when you hit a very large disproportionate amount of muscle to organ size, your pancreas is essentially inefficient to provide the amount of insulin required to fill those muscle tissues. So you're just going to wear your pancreas out. It would be like trying to continue to force your testicles to produce enough testosterone to maintain your physique as you got bigger. It just wouldn't be possible. At some point, your testicles would just burn out, right? So the same thing's going to happen to the pancreas. You're going to overstimulate the pancreas and burn it out, trying to shuttle 700, 800, 900, 1,000 grams of carbs. There's just no way. How you can't produce, the human body doesn't produce enough insulin to shuttle 1,000 grams of carbs. Therefore, you have to add insulin. This is in an environment where you're not fighting insulin resistance. This is just to maintain basal metabolic function, right? Then for these same athletes, these hypermuscular individuals, their appetite tends to go down because they're struggling to move enough glucose. In other words, they have the storage capacity, quote unquote, they have enough muscle mass to use all of that glucose, but the insufficient amount of insulin is keeping their blood sugars high and they're not able to move the glucose. So that's where we start using something like a Lantus, something more slow or medium acting insulin to work as a background to help support the pancreas's basal function, keep moving sugars into the muscle, maintaining healthy physiology for somebody that's hypermuscular on androgens and already disproportionately allocating nutrients to the muscle, not to fat. And then the last one is to offset insulin resistance from growth hormone abuse, essentially. So this is where insulin use is dangerous. This is where it's a question of how long can you do it before the side effects catch up. So you can maybe at the end of a training block, let's say the last four weeks, maybe 3 weeks even, you take growth hormone up. You go from your maybe 2 or 3 IUs, maybe 4. Now suddenly you're 5, 6, 7. You start stepping the growth hormone dose up. Your blood sugars are going to skyrocket. And because you're creating acute insulin resistance with that much growth hormone. Then you can fight that by adding insulin. So your blood sugar comes back down, but you're now driving insulin resistance is going to increase. So you have a time period that you can do this for before you have to stop. So this would come in specifically at the end of an off season where you're trying to push the last little bit of muscle mass. You're trying to really grind out that last little bit, the same time as when you would introduce orals, for example. Right? So you're trying to kind of cap off the cycle. That's when that would be logical or reasonable to use insulin to fight the growth hormone resistance, would be at the end of a cycle. And that's when you've already done everything else. You've introduced chromium, you've introduced like glucose, enhanced glucose transportation, you're doing your, sunlit cardio, you're taking your walks, you're doing all of the baseline things you can already do, and you're still insulin resistant because you're taking too much growth hormone, essentially, and then because you need to keep growing, so then we introduce insulin to kind of fight that insulin resistance. So that's the only time when you're really running into danger, is when you're playing that game, when you're running growth hormone and insulin through the roof. That's when people get like seriously ill. So like everyone at home can also see, like, so with acute use, those sort of short burst uses, you're using a short acting insulin, and it's only 1 to 10 IUs, which is a dosage that 10 IUs might make some people potentially pass out, but it's not enough to actually kill you. Like the medical literature on suicides through insulin indicates that insulin's a lot harder to kill yourself with than people assume.
You do go in a small coma.
Yeah, you do. You can go into a hypoglycemic coma. That's true, and people have died from this, right? So it's not that this isn't this. It's you can just be reckless with insulin and you'll survive. Some people do die. However, suicide attempts fail on insulin with insulin use. So people will pull a whole syringe of insulin, shoot like 100 IUs, and still not die, provided that everything else is functioning correctly.
I think the fear for everyone, like someone like me in particular, is it's like the thing of, I know that if you go on enough cycles for long enough in terms of just testosterone and it destroys your natural production of testosterone, right? So when you come off again, it might take. Sometimes it comes back, sometimes it doesn't. Like the testicles just don't produce enough testosterone to see if I can go, basically hypogonadal, right? So wouldn't the prolonged use of insulin, or like cycle use of insulin have the same effect? Like, wouldn't at some point your body's own production of insulin kind of, dry up?
Right. Yes. So that's a very good point, and that's a very good question. So insulin and growth hormone are peptide hormones, and they are mediated through a very immediate cascade. So let's say, like even so let's say with growth hormone use, right? Very high doses of growth hormone. Let's say in excess of 10 IUs of growth hormone, which is very, very large. Let's say that dose is being run for a couple of months. As soon as you come off, your pituitary will immediately go back to producing growth hormone, basically. And it's the same with the pancreas. So growth hormone and insulin are not susceptible to the same kind of downregulation because even with insulin use, your beta cells in the pancreas are still going to make some insulin, because every time your blood sugar goes up a little bit, they're going to release some insulin. It's going to come back down and they'll stop. So they're still working in that context because the insulin is not a signal to the beta cells to stop. So with testosterone, there's a negative feedback through the fact that there is testosterone present, whereas insulin itself isn't the negative feedback, it's the blood sugar. So the feedback mechanism is the beta cells are just watching the blood sugar for the most part, predominantly. So there's less of there isn't really this problem of them stopping their sort of physiological function. And in fact, if the carbs are very, very high, you'll be taking some stress off of the pancreas. Let's say if the carbs are, exceptionally high in the,
And I think obviously the other thing is, I think the reason why I've had a problem with it in the past, like thinking about doing it, is because there's a thought of like kind of getting type 2 diabetes.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I understand that. Yeah. And that is what happens if you do the growth hormone and insulin and you're fighting insulin resistance, but that's the type 2 diabetic. That comes from the bodybuilding. So you're symptomatically treating your high blood sugar with insulin. That's when you run into problems. And then the other way that you could get it from, you could actually get type 2 diabetes from not using insulin. So if you keep getting more and more muscular and there's no insulin present, you're going to burn your pancreas out, and then you will get type 2 diabetes. But it's like, no, actually you'll kind of give yourself type 1 diabetes is actually what you'll do.
But I've seen some guys that they look obese with muscle. Like they don't look buff anymore. They look like they're just fat with muscles.
Yeah.
It doesn't look good, man.
No, it doesn't.
I mean, because it's hard work, but aesthetically pleasing in any way.
No, I agree. But I would acutely use insulin, even some chronic insulin, like into a competition. Like I would use it until weeks before a competition because of the benefits that you can get that you otherwise wouldn't get without insulin in the picture.
And the water retention, like, is that any issue with using it?
So it will I've actually seen it dry me out because it will suck everything into the muscle. So acutely, it's going to pull all of the fluid and moisture and stuff in. So like there was one day where I was slightly dehydrated before the workout, but I did a shot of insulin and carnitine with, an intra-workout carbs. You have to do intra-workout carbs. This is actually part of the logic of doing the insulin so that you can drive carbohydrates into the muscle while you're exercising, because you will then offset the catabolic reactions of that workout. So in other words, instead of getting scooped out of during the workouts and having to refill the damn container afterwards, you're scooping out significantly less because you're pouring in at the same time. So it's, I mean, for me, it's made a huge difference. But anyways, that day when I was a little bit dehydrated, like I was flat. Like I wasn't like dry and hard. I was like flat, basically. The flat dehydrated look. And like by the middle of the workout, everything was full and thick and I was dry as fuck. Like it just sucked all of the moisture and fluid. And the same thing with like before getting on stage is you feed and you boom drive with insulin, and now it's just pushing all of those carbs into the muscle tissue, right? Because you're so damn hungry and so depleted. So provided that it's in an environment where you're insulin sensitive and your insulin management's already naturally good, it can just add to that. But if somebody's metabolically dysfunction, like you don't start an athlete with insulin if they're like fat and overweight and stuff, right? Like if someone who's trying to, like, it's not something you start with, it's something you introduce once you're already lean and you're actually, your feed efficiency is where it needs to be. So by feed efficiency, I mean how much food is going to fat storage versus muscle tissue. If you're doing enough damage in the gym, right? So you're eating a ton of food, and you're on enough androgens, then all of the nutrients are wanting to go to the muscle, provided that there's enough, there's enough stimulus. It's just going to keep shuttling everything to the muscle. Like that's why we see it's better to eat more and do more cardio to keep you insulin sensitive, and essentially because it's the cardio that's actually keeping you insulin sensitive, and you get bigger and bigger. So like some guys off season will do like 2 hours of cardio a day just so they can eat an extra 1,000 calories, which then they grow more.
I would much rather do cardio. I mean, when people think cardio, they always think jogging or fucking biking or some shit thing that makes you, heave and want to pass out, which I hate. I hate jogging. If I never have to jog again, unless I jog if I have to run away from something, or towards something, not for fun. I don't do it for fun. But like walking, man, I mean, I get at least 10,000 steps a day, and for me, in terms of like cardiovascular health wise, like my resting heart rate is like 58 beats a minute. I never have any issues with that. So I think you don't have to do intense cardio. Just like low intensity cardio, as often as you can. It actually, you don't even feel it. It's quite fun. And I think having a nice walk in the mornings is actually like, in terms of just cardio is beneficial, but clearing your head and starting your day is also a really great way to do it.
But it's people always think cardio equals fat loss, but it's like it's more than that. It's like it's actually increasing your cardiovascular like function, which means that you can build more muscle. Like if you're not cardiovascularly fit, I promise you're not going to get jacked. Like,
man, I mean, now you push yourself in the gym if you're not cardiovascularly fit. But like, try doing lunges. I used
to shit on cardio. I used to be the biggest cardio hater because I was anemic. Like I think I was slightly anemic because my androgens were too low. That's why the TRT made such a big difference for me. But I hated cardio because it always felt like hell, and I could never see a benefit. But now I've realized, like, when I add in, like, there was a limit to how much I could grow until I started adding cardio, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, I can just keep growing now.
That being said, sometimes I enjoy doing like fucking stairmaster for 30 minutes until I want to die. It depends on how you feel,
Yeah.
But I don't want to do that every week. Like going into a contest, maybe if I don't want to drop my calories more, I'll do like 3 times a week stairmaster, 300 calories, and then afterwards I'd walk 45 minutes or whatever. I think that for me, I much prefer that to drop the calories. But then at that point, when you're that like depleted for a show, that at some point cardio is the only thing you can still kind of do because weight training doesn't give you the same anymore. You're like, I'm just flat all the time. Everyone looks bigger than me. It's sad.
Yeah,
but people,
you have to look terrible in prep.
Yeah. But I mean, so many things, right? So many things like cardio and, what gear does and stuff. Like people lose a lot of the nuance. They only look at the one thing that they've been told it does. Like, cardio helps you lose weight, or it helps you live longer. But what the fuck does it mean? Or like, testosterone makes me bigger. But they don't look at the nuance of it, because I think for me, when I was younger, I mean, not too long ago, I was kind of afraid of delving into the information of things because it feels like so much fucking work, right? And that's the thing. Like, there's a mountain of knowledge, and no one wants to fucking start at the base of the mountain. It's not fun. So everyone, you kind of want to say, okay, I'll let this guy think for me, or like I'll just, this guy at the gym said, don't worry, training doesn't have any side effects. All it does is make you super horny. Don't worry about it. That's the worst thing. And like, yeah, all right, man. I want to believe you, so I'm going. So don't be afraid of doing research. Just try it.
Yeah. So you're wanting to compete again? I think we should talk about that before we end. So when would this be?
So I still have to make sure about the dates, but Thailand has recently opened like a IFBB federation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Up until recently, it was like like local federations and stuff like that. So the competition is in December. I'm not sure when, and if it's. I want to make sure that it's not a pro show, like a pro qualifier or whatever. But December is also, I think, having as much time between now and the contest always for me like.
Yeah. Even if it is a pro qualifier, like, what? Oh yeah, right. You're gonna do men's physique. Okay, so in December. Okay, so you've got like 10, 11.
I want to do classic at some point, but the weight cap for IFBB classic, like physique, for my height is 102 kilograms. Right? I mean, I weigh 89 kilograms right now.
Yeah.
That is a lot of weight. I mean, that's 102 kilograms. So
it's stage weights. Yeah, it's stage weights.
Yeah. So there's no way. Not right now.
Yeah. No, there's no point like necessarily trying to rush all the weights on. So, I mean, what I would recommend. How much time does that give us? Actually, let me see. Because I'm thinking we should do a massive accrual phase and then diet down for the show, right? Like, okay, how much are you on now?
What do you mean?
Like, how much gear are you on? How many androgens? What's your total milligrams a week?
I do 200 test and 200 chemo.
Okay.
But the test, the test is fucking Bayer test, which is pretty fancy. Just apply the fucking fault. It's great.
And your body weight?
88. 89. I think 88.
So let's see. We'll do a quick calculation here. What's your androgens per kg? 4.5. Okay. So you're a bit above what I would consider athletic HRT. So
yeah. No, it's 8 plus.
Well, so I wouldn't consider you on a cruise now. So I wouldn't consider this a cruise. I think the dosage is a bit high for it to be a cruise. That being said, that's not necessarily the end of the world that you're not, in a cruise, because you were kind of in a show prep mode and everything. I would honestly bring both down by maybe 50 milligrams. And then take like 4 to 6 weeks break from androgens, from just driving the androgens, and then work on getting an income so you can afford growth hormone.
Yeah.
Because growth hormone's recomp in a bottle. It turns fat into that turn fat into muscle, like it pretty much does that. Because it causes your fat cells to shrink and push the food into the system, and then the muscles suck it up and grow.
Yeah, I mean, also, there's a few things I want to ask. First, like, in terms of dropping 50 grams, 50 milligrams per, primo test, wouldn't that then reduce muscle mass as well?
Not really. Well, like the reason I want you to pull back a little bit is that it's not to resensitize to the androgen receptor. It's not that, because that's a myth. That's not how androgen receptors actually work. In fact, you just get more of them. Like, the more gear you take, the more receptors you'll grow. Like, you grow more receptors as you get bigger. The reason I would want you to drop the dose is for the myostatin side of things. When the androgens are cranked systemically for a long period of time, then we begin to run into this problem where we're kind of, what's the word? We're kind of like burning so the body kind of catches on to the fact that we're trying to grow super physiologically and starts to fight you a little bit. So you kind of need to let the body stop thinking that you're trying to You need to trick it, essentially. What you can actually do is just drop the testosterone down 100 milligrams, which will prevent any gyno. It's like 100 mgs a test, 200 primo. You could do that if you wanted to. If you wanted to avoid, like, because then you won't lose any. You will lose no fullness, fuck all. You'll actually dry out, and you'll see what you actually look like, which will be interesting. Like, you're gonna look better if you do that, right? So, because
that would be the lowest that my test would have been in fucking like 4 weeks.
But then I'm only gonna recommend you do that for like 4 weeks. This is I'm trying to I'm tricking your physiology into thinking something is happening that's not happening. So I'm tricking it into lowering its myostatin levels. Then we're gonna drive carbs. We're gonna cut your fat low, right? So we're gonna get a hyperinsulinemic state, and we're gonna drive IGF-1 by eating a lot of carbs. So you're gonna do high carb, low fat, really really lean food. Lots of carbs, lots of cardio during these weeks leading up to your next growth phase, let's say. So let's say you can take 4 weeks kind of off, or not 4 weeks off, 4 weeks of low test just to bring the estrogen and things down a little bit. You won't have to take any Arimidex, anything like that for that time period as well, which would be nice. You bring that down, and then what I would say is then after that, we could maybe take your test back up to 200, maybe even add a little primo. And then like maybe to go to 250 primo, 200 test. Test is going to stay at 200. For you, you're way too sensitive to the side effects of testosterone to take it any higher than 200. Like we've learned that already. So we're going to keep test at 200, keep that solid foundation there, and then just push primo up. Because then you'll avoid any side effects. Because primo is such a clean kind of thing, we're going to run that with growth hormone. And insulin pre-workout as a start. Low dose, like 2 IUs. It's like literally a few drops of insulin. We start with a very low dose of insulin pre-workout, a little bit of pre-workout carbs. You're going to take 40 grams of carbs with you to the gym, and you're probably going to drink half of them, realistically. Right in the beginning, and then we're going to slowly work up that pre-workout insulin dose until we get to like 5 IUs, and you feel okay. You're not going hypo. You're happy with that. There's no other issues. You're just doing it pre-workout and pre-weight training, right? Pre-hypertrophy training. And we're going to keep growth hormone at maybe 2 IUs, depending on what you can afford. Which is also why I recommend like cutting back on everything for a month, maybe save some of that cash. But then we want to run growth hormone, like maybe a stable 2 IUs, 1 to 2 IUs. We will start at 1 and then gradually increment it up as you like. We'll just see kind of how you feel and everything. Then we just push primo and growth hormone and insulin as the main drivers, because now we have a very selective DHT to take care of the androgen receptor. And by drive it, I mean 300, 400 max is probably all you're going to need to take. And then we'll drive the other anabolic pathways with the growth hormone and a little bit of insulin in that pre-workout window. And then once you get to 5 IUs pre-workout, we're going to add 1 IU post-workout to drive appetite a little bit so that you're eating a little bit more in that post-workout window. And to compensate for the carbs, we're going to take them out of your breakfast. So we're going to take breakfast carbs and put them post-workout. So we're now going to move food closer to the workout window as you're taking more insulin around the workout window, so that you have this low carbohydrate environment in the morning, and then which allows you to continue to burn fat because overnight, because you're going to take your growth hormone right before bed every night. So that's going to then drive fat burning and muscle hypertrophy through the night. And then in the morning, you're still going to be in that fat burning mode. So we're going to do a low carb breakfast with a little bit of fats, maybe a small portion of nuts and that sort of thing, just to get those like healthy fats in. And then you're having your carbs around the workout window with the insulin to really acutely drive growth. And then you can even lower your carbs again at dinner depending on how much carbs you can tolerate and need to take in, right? So we're obviously just going to flux it with how much, like whether you're flattening out because then you're not eating enough, whether you're starting to really spill over and starting to get a little bit of edema, like too much water retention from the extra carbs. We'll just play around with that.
I actually got some edema recently when I was here.
Was it
first time?
Was it just after you arrived, like right after?
No, so it was a week afterwards when 1 week because my brother was here for a while, and I never drink or party or whatever really often. So one weekend I went off diet, but I still ate not too much, but I ate like pizza and drank some beer and shit. And the Monday my legs, I couldn't see my fucking ankles. It was like I was genuinely worried for a day. And then when I just drank a ton of water, a ton. Then I slept and I woke up the next morning and I peed for like 2 minutes. And then I went back. I was genuinely worried. I'm like, oh fuck, what have I done? What should I do? But it was just a huge amount of carbs.
Yeah. So even with growth hormone, you're going to get that problem. It's going to really become a problem if the carbs just go way over the top, And what you can also do with growth is you can sort of take the weekend off. So you can take 2 days a week off. That's one of the protocols people recommend. You just kind of have to go by whether or not you get side effects. Like I don't seem to get too much water retention when I use like growth hormone releasers. I don't seem to get like crazy water retention, but I don't in general hold much water anyways. So we'll see with you whether or not that becomes a problem. But I don't think you're going to get too much at like 2 or maybe 3 IUs at the end. So so how I want to set up the training block is, and I want to go through that real quick, is the first week we're gonna kickstart everything by introducing the growth hormone in a high carb environment that's been set up beforehand. So that's going to get that IGF-1 and everything really going. You're introducing, maybe start off post-workouts. On the workout days, you start off with like 2 IUs, and then for the following week, you drop it back to 1. So you start off with this burst of growth hormone, just a little bit more than what your body is normally used to at its baseline level. You kind of create the spark of growth hormone. What that's going to do is create a spark of IGF-1, and it's going to begin the growth of new muscle cells from progenitor cells, like right from the base. So we're creating completely new muscle tissue, which is the only way to keep growing after you've reached a certain hypertrophic limit. So now we spark that IGF-1 cascade. Then you're gonna, for 6 weeks, you're gonna build architecture. So you're laying the foundation of the cycle. So we're gonna do high rep glycolytic work. So in other words, you're pushing glycogen capacity. Like how many reps, how much volume can I actually do? So that's where the 20 rep sets are gonna come in. It's gonna be burn focused workouts. It's gonna be very intense pumps, very volumizing type of training, right? Which is a lot of fun. Right. and then for the first 6 weeks, and with the growth hormone and insulin and everything, you're gonna get the craziest pumps you've had of your entire life. Then after those 6 weeks, you're gonna put on some mass and size. But what's actually happened on a cellular level is you've just gotten those new progenitor cells to start making new muscle fibers, as it were. So, or the building the strands. So now from week 7 until 12, we're going to start dropping the reps and pushing the weight up. So like I went from 20 rep sets down to like, I'm now doing sets of like 12. I've just crossed the 6 week mark for the training block. So now like most of what I've built is just volumization and mitochondria density. So in weeks 1 to 6, we're building increased blood flow because if you think about it, the body's always responding, like you said, it's forced to adapt, right? It has to adapt to what you're doing. When you do very high volume, what does it have to adapt to? Nutrient supply, right? Because you're pushing the muscle almost like to failure, but it's because of the amount of substrate. It's like it's running out of energy, right? So you cause it to what? Store more energy. So you're forcing energy storage capacity in the muscle tissue. You're also telling it that it needs more blood. You're telling it there's not enough blood flow here. So you're upregulating VEGF, vascular endothelial growth factor, which is the hormone that creates angiogenesis, the birth of new blood vessels. So, like, I've gotten crazy vascular in these 6 weeks, and it's because I'm constantly creating this VEGF stimulus so that I'm growing more blood supply to the muscles. And what we know about the stem cells, for example, is that stem cells that are closer to the blood vessels are more active, or usually active as versus the ones that are further away. So the more we can get the blood, it's like a road. Think about a city. If you want to expand a city, you need to build the roads and infrastructure first. So in those first 6 weeks, we're setting up infrastructure. We're setting up the mitochondria to be able to do energy, more energy, right? So we have the ability to actually power that new material we want to build. We're building the roads, water supply, all of those nutrients, all of the pathways to get things there. Then 7 to 12, we're going to make use of the new infrastructure to add muscle mass. So we're going to train in around the 12 rep range, 10 to 12. So it's like the traditional heavy, like kind of heavy hypertrophy kind of training, right? We're actually breaking down muscle tissue here. But we have the infrastructure to handle that kind of stress. So we're not going to burn out, but we can keep doing that. So we do that for 6 weeks. And then after that, at about the 12-week mark, what's now happened is all of these progenitor cells have not only learned that they need to have a lot of mitochondria, but they also need a lot of blood, and they also need to be strong as fuck. So we've sequenced them and trained these new cells to do exactly what we want them to do, which is contribute towards contractile force and ability and bigger. Then for like anywhere from 1 to 3 weeks, we test what we have. We're doing the sort of it's sort of the kill off the cycle, right? Finish strong, and you're kind of just getting the body used to a very high stress state. So now we're doing drop sets, we're doing that, that end of training block kind of work, and then we take time off. And then we're going to do like a deload after that. So how hard you push at the tail end of it is going to depend on how much your body can handle. So you're going to then, like after the 12 weeks, it's like, okay, all of the infrastructure is built. Now we're going to stress test the infrastructure. We're going to make sure that this infrastructure is really, really strong. And then we just push until the body's like, stop, and then we give it a break. And now the body's going to acclimatize to that new level of growth and progression. Because you've noticed if you change things at around the 6-week mark, there seems to be the sudden benefit. Every 6 weeks, if you change an element in the training program, so if we change the very specific stimulus, we can sort of stage it in a more efficient way. Then, which, as you'll notice, those 6 weeks also fit in with the ester half-lives. So if we're increasing the dosage at week 1, then at around week 6, it's gonna peak, and then if you want to increase the dosage again, at week 12, it's gonna peak. So you're gonna get this nice staged kind of increase. So, so what I'm doing is I'm at about week 6. I feel like I wanna go up in dosage. I don't have growth hormone on hand, and it'll be a while before I'm able to do that. So I'm going to, instead of adding more growth hormone, because I can't push the MK any higher than 10, it's side effects as previously mentioned. So I'm going to push my testosterone up again a little bit. I'm going to stay under 300 mgs. I'm going to probably take it up like 4 milligrams a day for the first couple of days, and then maybe bump it again. I'll see. Like I'll kind of feel it out to the point where I'm like, okay, I feel like this is physiologically, this is driving everything that I wanted to drive. But honestly, I'm also considering adding Primo as opposed to adding more testosterone. But I don't feel that it's like smart to add another compound until I've like really tested testosterone out properly, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think, like I said earlier, like I think it's better to get a feel for everything as it is right now, and then if you add in Primo after you know exactly what everything does, then you know what the benefits of it is.
Yeah.
But Primo, from my experience, I mean, like in terms of side effects, I've not noticed any side effects at all.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, I've not done a fucking rigorous blood panel recently, so I can't tell you in terms of that. But just from a anecdotal perspective, feeling wise, I don't feel worse. In terms of like my estrogen's more fucking controlled and stuff like that as well. Also, I wanted to ask you, Now, when I used the Mk-677, I did notice a spike in the growth of it wanted to spike the growth of my gyno. At least I kept that under control. But if I were to use an actual growth, wouldn't have the same effect to some extent.
Which is why I'm recommending a higher dose of Primo and keeping your testosterone at 200. Because look, like you're a high aromatizer. So my assumption is that you're aromatizing a large amount of your testosterone into estrogen. When we get your blood work back from the next one, because we'll do testosterone, estrogen, SHBG, all that, then I'll be able to tell actually. But I actually think you're aromatizing a significant amount of testosterone into estrogen. Disproportionately, like you because of the fact that you were a fat kid, right? Like, so there's that extra, there's that extra aromatization potential that's potentially been set up already. You are right, which is why I've recommended that you go up in Primo dosing. So you take more Primo and a maintenance dose of testosterone just to keep everything in the background, sex drive, those sorts of things, just the basic physiological functions going. You're not looking at testosterone as an anabolic because you don't respond well to high doses of test. Every time we've taken it up, you get sick, you feel like shit. So testosterone's not going to be your avenue for driving gains at all. You could, so the other options is you could add EQ to suppress estrogen and suppress the sort of estrogenic side of the gyno. But
I've used EQ in the past, and I can't really. So I can't remember because it's so long ago, but I know that EQ can cause heavy anxiety, like fucking intense anxiety.
Yeah.
So that's something obviously to keep an eye on, because isn't like I might be mistaken, but like the point at which when EQ becomes actually, when it starts working, is quite a bit into the use of it, like a few weeks.
Yeah. So unless you can get a short ester of boldenone, like like an enanthate or something, usually it's like a deca ester almost. It's a super long ester.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the problem. That's the only downside of EQ. But usually you will then run.
You start having
Sorry.
You're going to start feeling the side effect. You're going to be stuck with it for a while. But I do know of guys who have used it and have had no issues with it. They do like it.
Yeah. So there's two issues with EQ that are problematic. Is that it'll suppress estrogen to the point that you'll stop making gains. It can actually do that. So, like Jay Cutler ran his favorite cycle. He says was 500 tests and 600 EQ. I don't know if you saw his Greg Doucette interview. That was he said that was the sweet spot for him.
I can only do like 2 Greg Doucette videos a week.
The only reason I watched it was because Jay Cutler was giving his actual cycle info, dude. Like I don't like Doucette for a number of reasons, and mostly because he doesn't seem to actually know anything about any of it. Like it just is. Like he's been telling people insulin is gonna kill them and stuff, and it's like, dude, like. No, insulin is significantly more safe than growth hormone. On if you take 15 IUs of growth hormone, you could end up giving yourself a heart attack. Like just because of the amount of edema, right? If you take 15 IUs of growth hormone and you go out and smash a bunch of pizzas, you could literally cause so much fluid retention, you could cause your heart to stop. Right? Like if you've never taken growth hormone and you go shoot a massive dose, it could kill you. Insulin, it's harder to do that with insulin.
What I've noticed about him is that I don't always think. I think he knows quite a lot, but he wants to make it as easily understandable to the layman as possible. So because he was like a PT teacher, or whatever, right?
Yeah.
So he dumbs it down to the fucking to the extent that basically anyone can understand what he says. So I'm unsure of how much he always knows. But also, he was an old school, not old school, but like when he used to do bodybuilding, a lot of rhetoric was different to what it is now. I think a lot of studies have been done and things have changed in recent years that he has not taken into account yet.
Yeah, I mean that's probably true, right? Like, and I don't think he's necessarily trying to keep up to date with PED information. But like some of the videos I've watched, it's like like the when he explains Anavar or this or that, it's like you're not really giving people like, this is very poppy, and it's like, it's fine, I guess that's fine, right? Like, I guess the average person can get some kind of pop idea of it, and he's gonna at the end of the video tell them not to take it, which is good because his advice about the compound isn't sufficient enough for them to make an informed decision anyways. So like, all well and good. But I guess
well, Vigorous Steve is my opinion the go-to for
yes,
that type
yeah,
of
exactly. Although I will say, like, Vigorous Steve has some odd opinions about certain like, he has certain odd approaches in terms of his, like, he really likes keeping everything bioidentical. Like, he likes he likes testosterone growth and insulin as like the off season. Like, don't take anything else if you can. But so many people.
Leo longevity.
Sorry.
Is it Leo longevity that? So I was like, that was Vigorous Steve. Because I know Vigorous Steve, he had a client that he gave like his TOC had Primo.
Yes, so no, that's true, but he also has an entire ebook on bioidentical off-season growth. Like, Vigorous Steve does encourage keeping things bioidentical if you can, right? Quotes are, like, that's his main thing, is pushing the bioidentical. But the reason that we invented these other versions of testosterone was because we didn't want them to be bioidentical, because we wanted them to be more specific. So specificity came in because we wanted to engineer them to do no, it's all good. Yeah, so we engineered like androgens to be specific, to do one or two things, not to do everything that testosterone does, because testosterone will turn into DHT, it'll turn into estrogen, and it'll go through the whole spectrum of cascades. So pushing testosterone is also going to push all of the side effects. It's going to push DHT side effects, it's going to push estrogen potentially side effects. Like, it's like there's very few guys that can just grow on testosterone. Very few guys. And the only sport where to just pure testosterone you can take to high levels and still it be useful is if you're a strongman.
Yeah.
And the reason is because testosterone gives you such a broad foundation that for strongmen that actually works out. Because you don't just want to be quick, you want to have endurance. You don't just want to have endurance, you want to have like acute muscular output. But you also need to have this, you need to have that, you need to have like the water retention to protect your joints, you need this, so it's like, in that case testosterone's a little bit more useful and like broad spectrum. But if you're a power lifter and you want to keep your weight down, Masteron's the way to go. It's going to drive that. I'm sure, I don't know if you can remember what Masteron feels like, but it drives strength gains in the gym like crazy.
And you feel great, like the feeling of like actual like wellness, like well-being.
Can you get Superdrol?
Yeah, probably. I think I can probably get anything.
Do you know what Superdrol actually is? Like in terms of which family? It's oral Masteron.
Oh, really?
Superdrol is oral Masteron. Yes. I only found this out the other day, and I'm like, oh my god, that makes sense. Like, I understand what it is now. Superdrol is oral Masteron.
Oh yeah. Oh.
They have what?
Oral primobolan.
Oh yeah, primobolan acetate. Yeah.
Yeah. Never seen it before.
No, our guy has it.
Oh, really?
yeah. No, our guy has it. No, he has it. It's on the menu.
What uses that?
It's right before a show, dude, just to harden up. Just to get that extra DHT effect, like adding a little Winstrol at the end. It's just to harden up a little bit. But you're gonna get more side effects because you're having to digest it through the liver. You could consider adding. You could consider adding super, because I don't think you're gonna respond well to Anadrol. You're already prone to gyno, so I don't think we can give you Anadrol because that's gonna give you a gyno bomb. So let's rather, if you want to push like a hard, like an off seat. Well, it just depends on what you need. But like so Turinabol is great for athleticism, just the overall athletic, like endurance, all of that sort of thing. An overall athlete drug because it was developed for athletes. Dianabol is great. It drives mood, also drives that estrogen pathway, but that can be, it's basically a form of testosterone. Dianabol and turinabol are both basically oral testosterone, one form of it. Then your Superdrol and Anavar are DHT derivatives and Winstrol. So it's going to push the hard, dry protein accumulation kind of thing. And then you've got your Anadrol, which is a little bit more complicated, but it has more of an estrogenic kind of potential, which can be an issue.
The DHT derivatives for me have always, I've always responded the best to that.
Yeah.
You know, like when I've used Winstrol in the past, I put on like fucking 4 kilogram weight.
Wow.
Obviously, it's also a lot of intramuscular potential, but when I get off it again, like I retain mass as well.
Yeah.
Like for me, DHT always beat the best.
Yeah. So I'm thinking we should test out Superdrol just to see how you respond, because we know Anavar works on you and we know Winstrol works on you, right? So we might as well test out the lost DHT derivative at some point, because then at least we know, because Superdrol is something that you might do a little bit more off season. It doesn't, as far as I can estimate, it doesn't give you as much of that hard, dry look that, let's say, a Winstrol will, because Winstrol is the driest thing on the planet. So maybe we can use the Superdrol in the off season, just around the peri-workout window, with the workout, let's say pre-workout, with that insulin and everything, which will drive acutely, it's going to drive those cascades. So with orals, you're not really looking at wanting to microdose them all day, generally speaking, because you just use an injectable, right? Like, why don't you just inject more of something else instead of just having to take the orals all day, right? Like, and because it's an inefficient method. The benefit is that we can introduce it either before or after the workout to either drive performance or recovery. So when you introduce it after the workout, you're introducing it in an environment where the body's trying to heal. So you boost that portion of it. I know apparently Alex Kiekel likes using Anavar post-workout because he says it drives recovery very efficiently. And Superdrol is an injectable he likes post-workout. But I think we should test Superdrol if we can as an oral and see how you respond to that. Just because I know of how much people really like that as an off-season, especially towards that end of the training cycle, so to speak.
Yeah.
Okay. And then, so it's March is basically done. So you got 8 months before December. 2 months would be 16. So what I'm going to suggest is that we do that 12, 14 week bulk. Okay, so what I'm going to suggest is that we're gonna not push androgens too high for the bulk. I would rather push growth hormone, actually, like to 3 IUs or something towards the end. The reason why is you're going to deload for 2 weeks and begin contest prep. So I would like to drive with growth hormone a little bit, especially because we've never taken advantage of that pathway significantly for you. So we're gonna take maybe 300 primo, maybe 150 test, something like that, and then we could add a little, maybe another 100 primo in the middle of the cycle and take it up to 400. Let you deload, and then we start your contest prep.
Yeah.
And then we maybe add. Yeah, and then we'll maybe drop the primo dose for the deload. Obviously, at the end, we'll drop the primo out, let it kind of the levels drop a little bit, and then we'll bring it back up right away for your contest prep, and then you'll start dieting for the show, essentially. And then we'll take the primo dose up, maybe up to 6, maybe up to about 500 or so, and then we're gonna add Masteron on top. But I'm also, we have to, like, the only thing I'm concerned about is that I don't want you to injure yourself because of the masteron. It can cause that. It can, like, the aggression in the gym can cause you to injure yourself. So
it's also because it's so fucking fun.
That's no, I understand. So if we can not take too much of the masteron and kind of rely a little bit more on the primo, granted that the budget allows and everything, I think that could really benefit. And then we'll just taper everything depending on body weight and everything else like that.
Yeah, sounds good. I'm excited.
So, yeah, find out, how much growth you'll be able to afford, so we can start figuring out what we're going to take and how much of it and everything. Figure out what insulin you have access to, etc., and then we'll start working that out. Because
check it out.
Because I'd like to put you on some Lantus, because Lantus has been shown to raise IGF-1. It's like, it's the one that raises IGF-1 the highest. And IGF-1 is cool because IGF-1 alleviates some of the need for the insulin almost. So the insulin is helping you not need the insulin as much, because IGF-1 will drive all of those functions of insulin without actually being necessarily insulin. Which is how you know that a lot of the IGF-1 isn't very good on the market, because when you inject it, you don't go hypo the way you would if you have insulin.
Historically, I mean, from what I've heard, like, IGF-1 is basically impossible to get real IGF-1.
Yeah. Apparently. And it also seems like the non-bioidentical versions just don't quite, the body doesn't quite, like, Increlex is the FDA approved IGF-1. And it's literally like super expensive everywhere. There's no place in the world that you can get Increlex cheap, which means that it must be expensive to make, right? Like, obviously it's very difficult and expensive to make and preserve, and they're having to, like, keep it on ice basically continuously round the clock. Like, it must be this very fragile thing. But anyways, so are you happy with somewhat of that approach?
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, I think it's good, man. I think I'm willing to try it out.
Great. How much do you think I should bump my test up?
You're on, what, 200 now?
210.
Yeah, doing small increments. I mean, depending how much time you want to do the cycle for, I think maybe 250. Okay.
Because
they're used to bumping up to 300 now and having a huge spike.
Yeah, I'm getting side effects.
You see what happens, and then if you're unhappy with that, I mean, it's also, it won't be your last cycle as well.
Yeah, no, I feel like I've fully assimilated this dose. If that makes sense, it feels like my body's completely on top of it. Like, in the beginning, it was this novel stimulus, and, like, my body's like, yeah, that's normal now. I'm good with this. Like, it feels like I'm completely handling it. Like, my body is completely used to this dosage now. This is probably going to be my, like, TRT dose or maintenance dose going forward. Like, I'll probably come back to this as a maintenance.
Yeah, I think 200, for me, I found 200, obviously, TRT plus, it's not really TRT. But, I mean, for me, I found 200 is a good place to hold up.
Yeah.
In general. Anything above that is just, you get guys that cruise on 250 or whatever like that. I mean, to each their own. But obviously, a certain body weight, you kind of have to do that.
But imagine if you were 100 kgs, your cruise dose would have to be a little bit higher. That's
true. But I mean, like 200, I found is quite good.
Yeah. No, so
you don't have.
Yeah, so I'll take it up. I'll bump it up a little bit, and then we'll kind of review what happens as a result of that. Hopefully, it'll all be, be good. I'm wondering now, maybe 34 milligrams a day. Yeah, I think I'll raise it to 34 from tomorrow. No, I'm not going to do it tomorrow. I'll do it on the next training day. But yeah, cool, man. I think that's that. We'll yeah, I mean, if the viewers have questions, like, guys, please just comment and ask. We'll try and answer any questions you guys have, because we're a small channel. We actually will get back to you. And yeah, and is there anything else you wanted to say, or?
Thailand is fucking hot as fuck.
Yeah, you guys are going into
And
summer, I think.
Yes, I wish I had an aircon. That's about it. That's why.
Fair enough.
I live and being like a fucking glazed donut.
Yeah.
It's good.
No, fantastic. All right, dude. Let's call it there.